Hi everyone, I'm Rhonda and welcome to a new video. Today I am going to be talking about all the books I gave 5 stars to so far this year. So this video is just going to be a video about all of my favorite reads so far this year. I have about 10 books that I want to talk about. Those are the only books I've given 5 stars to, which means I've been a little pickier and a little more stingy about what books I give 5 stars to and which books I don't. And that kind of jives just about right, just because I think when I give a 5-star to a book, you just get that feeling like this was such a good book. I couldn't find any flaws with it. And that's when I just slap 5 stars on it. So again, I have 10 books and I did try and put them in some kind of order. So I'm going from 10th to 1st place. And once we get into the middle and especially up into the top 2 books, they're really interchangeable. All of these books are just so good. I have some romance, I have a lit fic, I have historical fiction, general fiction, I mean just a little bit of everything. You know what, let's just start talking about these books. The book that I ranked number 10 is The Passion Project by London Sperry. This is a rom-com. This is kind of like a friends to lovers romance, and it is set in New York City. And this book is very much about grief, and it is very much about debilitating depression to the point where you can't even get out of bed and take a shower, okay? So this book is about a woman by the name of Bennett, and her fiance has passed away, and she is just having a hard time with it. She blames herself, and she's just going through the motions of life. Well, one of her friends is really concerned about her. It's been, I think, a few years, and she tells her, you know what, why don't you go on a date and just put yourself out there and see what happens. And so she agrees to do that. However, right before she goes on this date, she has a little bit of a panic attack and doesn't show up. And the date she was supposed to go on was with this guy named Henry, and through a series of events they end up meeting, and he realizes, hey, she is not ready to start dating again. She is dealing with grief and depression, and what she really needs is a friend. And so he kind of gets with her and he's like, you know what? You live in the greatest city in the world. You have so much to live for. Let me help you bring passion back into your life. And so that's where the Passion Project comes from. They embark on this just a fun summer of just hanging out with each other as friends and spending time together and doing fun things in New York City. I really love this. I love the setting of it being in New York City. I loved how it handled very carefully someone who's dealing with grief and depression as a result of that grief, and someone who is blaming herself. I loved how the author took her time with these two people. They definitely went on this journey of being friends and just hanging out together and getting to know each other, and he's really helping her. And once they kind of go through this friendship, then they start having feelings for each other. And I really enjoy love stories where they just really take the time with each other before they just jump into things. So even though this book is about grief and depression, this is a rom-com. So I laughed as much as I cried in this book. And I feel like because it's a rom-com, it didn't go too deep into the depression and into grief. It kind of handled it in a very light-handed way, and I enjoyed it. It was so good. And yeah, this was a little bit of a heartbreaking, but it was also hopeful. It kind of made you feel like, you know what? Yes, I'm in dark days right now, but I can see the light at the end of the tunnel, and there is hope for me, and that is what this book delivered on. So that is why I love this book so much. Ranked number 9 is Sunday Morning by Julie Ann, and this was definitely a surprise favorite for me this year because it really towed the line on what I'm comfortable with. This is a forbidden romance. It is a very spicy romance, and it's also kind of like a small town contemporary romance. But here we are following Sarah, and she is one of 3 daughters, and she is raised in a home where she is supposed to be very devout. Her father is actually the town preacher, and she is expected to kind of marry her longtime boyfriend and become a wife and just continue the line, basically. Well, she doesn't want that. She has dreams and aspirations of her own. She wants to be a songwriter, and the relationship with her boyfriend at the time is their relationship has kind of fizzled out, and they both are together because their families expect them to be. They get along, but that romance just really isn't there anymore. Well, one day her boyfriend's older brother comes back to town. He has gotten out of the military, and sparks fly. She's instantly attracted to him. So this is a boyfriend's older brother trope, which It is a forbidden romance. Normally I'm not into that sort of thing, but it worked in this book and I thoroughly enjoyed this. This definitely reminded me a little bit of, like, I'm getting crumbs of A Star is Born. So if you've seen the movies, then you might like this one. I love the romance in here, and I do not like spice like at all in my books. I get very uncomfortable and I start skimming or skipping those scenes. But the way the author wrote these scenes were very enjoyable, and this is a book I couldn't put down. I flew through it. I read it in less than 24 hours. I laughed, I cried, I sighed. I mean, so much happened in here, and I really, really enjoyed it. So that's why this is on the list. Again, this is normally not a book I would enjoy, and if you're like me, I would say try this. It's on Kindle Unlimited for free, so give it a chance and see if it's something you can read. I was surprised with how much I enjoyed it. This one was a surprise favorite, and I highly recommend it. Coming in at number 8 is Courtney Walsh's newest release called Everything's Coming Up Rosie. So this book is about Rosie, and she ends up getting a job as a director at a theater, and she's thinking it's just a small town community theater, but boy is she wrong. It ends up being a theater at a retirement community, and she needs to help direct these senior citizens in doing a production of Cinderella. And this book was so cute, and Rosie is so funny. Courtney Walsh writes really incredible characters. She really knows how to develop the characters. Every one of the characters in this book, including our female main character, our male main character, and all of the side characters, just really jumped off the page. I fell in love with every one of them, and the senior citizens in this book, the actors in this book, I just wanted to be around them. They were hilarious. They just, all of them just jumped off the page, and she did such a good job of writing out those characters and developing those characters. So this book, including all of Courtney Walsh's book, is a clean, well, it's not really closed door just because there is absolutely no spice. I think you get like 1 or 2 kissing scenes, and they're very just really sweet moments. But her books don't have any spice. There's no cussing. There's no, silly miscommunication problem. They're just really sweet, wholesome love stories, and I appreciate that. I feel like when it comes to clean romances or closed door romances, there is more of a development with the relationship, and there's more emphasis on the relationship than on the bedroom scenes, and I personally like that more. So this was just a solid, wholesome, sweet, funny romance. And if you're looking for a good contemporary romance this summer, I would say definitely pick this one up. It was so delightful. Ranked number 7 is The Last Love Note by Emma Gray. I read this one a couple of months ago, and I really enjoyed this. I believe this is her debut novel, but this one is definitely kind of like a women's fiction with a side plot of a romance. And here you're following Kate, and her husband has passed away a couple of years ago, so she is now a single mom to a 5-year-old boy. And one day she is actually on an airplane to go on a business trip with her boss, and the flight is diverted to a beach town in Australia. So they are in this beach town together, and while she's there, she finally gets a moment after 2 years to just kind of be herself and to process her grief and try to decide what next. And so that is what this book is about. It was so moving and so heartfelt. It was beautifully written. This is a debut novel, I think, for Emma Gray, and I was very impressed with the writing and the way she handled some comedic moments. And it was just so good. This is another book I couldn't put down. I read it within 24 hours. It's a book that I stayed up all night reading just because I was immersed in this beautiful story of love and grief and healing and moving on. Yes, I absolutely cried in this book, but I also laughed a lot just because there are some comedic moments. I love the love story in this book. I felt like she gave our female main character a moment to kind of grieve and decide on her own when she's ready to move on, and the author just did a great job with that. Now this is told in different timelines. Obviously, you're following Kate now as she's going through the motions of her life without her husband and raising her child as a single mom now. But you're also going back in time and you're learning about her relationship with her husband and what happened to him. And I think that's what really added to the emotional factor for me, is knowing about her past relationship with her husband and what happened to him. It was just, It gutted me. But this book just, it touched my heart deeply and I absolutely recommend it. I am in the process of reading her second book called Pictures of You, and I'm really enjoying that one too. But if you want an emotional read, definitely pick this one up. It was so, so good. All right, unfortunately, I need to take a pause on this video. I'll be back probably in 30 minutes. I need to go drop off my youngest daughter at one of our community pools. She made plans today to hang out with some friends and go swimming, and one of the moms is actually gonna watch over them. She just can't pick everyone up. So I'm going to go drop her off and then I'll be back and we'll finish going over the last 6 books. Okay, that took a lot longer than I thought it was going to. It's actually well over an hour later. I thought it was just gonna be 30 minutes, but so I live in a master plan community and we have about 5 community pools in my neighborhood, and the girls wanted to go to this one pool. So I drove Gemma, my youngest, to that pool and I saw that it was closed. So I texted the mom of her other friend and she said, well, let's go to this other pool. So I drove over there. That one was closed. So at this point, I'm like, okay, let's pull up a pool schedule and see what's open. And come to find out, obviously the 2 pools that they wanted to go to is closed on Mondays and Tuesdays. And so I ended up driving to the 3rd pool and that's where they're at now. But all's good, the kids are happy at the pool. And let's finish talking about some really good books. So I'm on book number 6 and I want to talk about Evelyn Hugo next. This was my very first Taylor Jenkins Reid book, and what an intro into this author. This book was absolutely incredible. And when I was reading this book, I was actually thinking of Elizabeth Taylor the entire time, because here you're following Monique as she is telling the story of Evelyn Hugo. She has been hired by Evelyn Hugo to write her memoir for her. And Evelyn Hugo is, I think she's in her 80s at this point, but she is kind of a recluse. She used to be a very famous Hollywood actress, like during the golden age of the Hollywood movie making era. And she was very well known, very beautiful, and kind of not really infamous, but she was very famous for being married, obviously 7 times. And so Monique's job is to just interview her, and Evelyn Hugo says, you can ask me any question and I will answer any of those questions truthfully. I want you to tell my story. And the main point of this book is to tell the story of who was the love of Evelyn Hugo's life. And I loved how this book was written because it's kind of broken up into husbands. So there are 7 kind of chunks of the book where she is telling the story of how Evelyn Hugo met husband number 1, husband number 2, you know, and so on and so forth. And she's talking about how she fell in love, if she was in love, how they met, how those marriages ended. And ultimately, you do find out who the love of Evelyn Hugo's life was. And this book was just, it was incredible. I really can't think of another word than that. I remember when I finished this book, I didn't pick up another book immediately. Usually as soon as I finish one book, if it's earlier in the day, that evening I'll pick up another book. But when I finished this one, I did not read for 24 hours. I need a moment to really absorb what I read and come to terms with my emotions and my grief and my anguish. This was just so amazing. Taylor Jenkins Reid is an incredible storyteller. I mean, obviously she's a good writer, but she knows how to tell a great story. She knows how to organize her story very well so that it is very bingeable. With all of the books I've read 3 of her books now. With every single one of them, I am sucked in with that first few sentences, and I am just engrossed in the story until the last word of the very last chapter. And also too, she knows how to write characters and make them jump off the page so that they feel real. It's just, when I finished this book, I had such anguish and I was feeling such heartbreak for a character that doesn't even exist. You know, I wouldn't normally feel this way unless it was for a real person. I feel like an author does a great job when she evokes those emotions from her readers, and that's what TJR does so far with every book I've read. She's done that. So this was amazing, and I feel like if you are one of the few people like I was who had not read this author, she is very hyped up for a very good reason. She is really, really good, and if you haven't read anything by her, I would suggest starting out with this book. It was just absolutely incredible. Coming in at number 5 is Queen of Shadows by Sarah J. Maas. This is a fantasy, and okay, so this is an 8-book series. The first book is Throne of Glass, and that is touted as being a YA fantasy, but as the series is going on, it's more like an adult fantasy, just because the world building is getting a lot more complicated. The politics is getting a little bit more complicated, and just the storyline is definitely more adult-like. So I would say it starts off YA, but then it gets to be more adult-like. Before I got to this book, it was actually more of like a 3 to 4 star series. I was enjoying it, but I wasn't understanding a lot of the hype. And that was until I got to this book. I had trouble putting this book down. There were no lulls at all. There was constantly something happening or information that we are given. This is a long book. It's over 600 pages, but I think if I didn't have other books I was reading at the same time, I would have flown through it just because I was just engrossed in the story and what was happening. We were introduced to more characters. We were introduced to other parts of the world, and it was just an immediate 5-star read. I love this. I am currently reading the 5th book called Empire of Storms. I'm only on chapter 5, so I'm not very far into it, but I am enjoying that one too. And then when I finish that, I'll have 2 books left. So I'm nearing the finish line with that series, and like I said, I'm enjoying it. It's a good time, but this one is my favorite so far. And if you haven't read Throne of Glass, right now I would say I am very much enjoying the series. I get the hype. I'm not quite on board with the hype yet, but I'll check in with you when I finish the series and let you know if it's well worth the hype. Okay, the book that I ranked at number 4 is Adeline by Genevieve Wheeler. I believe this was her debut novel, and it was written a few years ago, and I don't think she's written anything else since then. And this one is, I think it's supposed to be a contemporary fiction, but I feel like it's more literary fiction than anything, because in this book we are following Adelaide, and she is an American living in London, and she meets this guy named Rory, and she feels like they are fated to be together, like they are meant to fall in love and get married and spend a life together. However, while they are dating, he is not always there for her. Sometimes she'll call him and he won't call her back, or they'll make plans and he won't show up. So he comes across as being the type of guy that has one foot in the door and one foot out. And so she's just trying to hold on to the pieces of this relationship. So that is this book in a nutshell. What was interesting about this book is that it was a little bit autobiographical for the author. There is an author's note where she talks about names have been changed, but she has pulled from real life. So I really appreciated that. So what I love most about this was how beautifully it was written, how it covered the topic of mental health, and how incredibly relatable this was, because I wish that this was published back in the day, because 20-something-year-old Rhonda would have devoured this book, and it really would have helped her out in a few of her relationships, let's be honest. So overall, this was just an incredible book, and as I said, it was relatable. I loved how it talked about mental health. I loved how it captured the complexities of love, the inevitable heartbreak of relationships. I mean, we all know that feeling of having our heart broken, and she really nailed that. I don't typically like literary fiction just because I feel like a lot of it is written over my head, or the book is written to win an award, so it's written to judges, or the books are taking themselves too seriously, and lit fic is not always for me, let's just say that. But I felt like because I could relate to Adelaide, that I've been there, I've been in her shoes, it just hit hard for me. This book was simply remarkable, and I would absolutely recommend it to everyone, especially to those of you who are kind of navigating those turbulent dating waters. Then this one is absolutely for you. All right, we are down to my top 3 books. Coming in at number 3 is The Favorites by Lane Fargo. And there for a while, this book was my number 1 favorite of the year. However, it did obviously get knocked off by a couple of books. But in this one, we are following Katerina Shaw and Heath Rocha as they meet as kids and they start training together to be ice dancers. Katerina Shaw, her dream in life is to win, to be the best, and to get gold at the Olympics. And she is very driven to the point where she is obsessed with winning. Also with this book, in the beginning, it opens up with kind of like an interview format. Apparently something happened 10 years ago at the Sochi Olympics with Katerina and Heath. And we don't know what it is, we don't know what happens, but this is the 10-year anniversary and they're doing a documentary about that. And so they're just interviewing people who knew Heath and Katerina and kind of talking about what happened and their rise to fame and then what happened at those Olympics. Anyway, this book as a whole was so good. It was so dramatic, so theatrical. The relationships in here is so messy. It really covered obsession so well. Obsession with winning in the Olympics, the obsession with each other and other competitors. It was just a compelling read, and I was hooked from the very beginning, and I could not fly through this book quick enough. I really liked how this was structured too, because you'll get the beginning of a chapter where there is a couple of pages of an interview format, and then the subsequent chapters are from Katerina's point of view of what really happened. So I thought that was very interesting and captivating, and that made it more bingeable. But overall, I just love the intense messiness of the relationship between Katerina and Heath. I felt like it was twisted and intriguing, and I loved this book. If you like books where there is a ton of drama and just crazy stuff that is happening, then this is the book for you. Just love this, and I absolutely recommend it. So we are down to my last two books, and I had a really difficult time deciding which one I loved over the other one, because I feel like I love them both equally. It's like picking my favorite child. Both of these were so good in their own way, and they're so very different from each other that I couldn't decide. So they're both tied for number one. The first book I'm going to talk about, and I guess we'll say it's number two even though it's not, is The Women by Kristen Hanna. I read this last month, and this is my second Kristen Hanna book. This one is historical fiction. The other book I read was The Nightingale, and that was a 5-star read for me, but I love this even more than The Nightingale. I was on the fence with reading this. I have family members who served in the Vietnam War, so I knew going into this book it was going to be a difficult read, because in this book you are following a woman by the name of Frankie as she joins the military and goes off to the Vietnam War, and she serves as a nurse. And so you're following her as she has her experiences in Vietnam, as she's making friendships with other women and forming other relationships, and it was just very moving. But a big chunk of this book too is also following Frankie when she comes home from the war and how she's treated by her family and friends as well as society, and it was really heartbreaking. She's also dealing with PTSD, and I felt like this is probably one of the most well-researched books I have ever read. As you guys probably know, I've mentioned this before, but I had a couple of uncles who served in the Vietnam War, and they don't talk about the hardships of the war. They don't talk about the difficult times. My living uncle would only talk about the funny moments, the lighthearted moments, the fun times. He never talks about anything else. And he deals with pretty severe PTSD. So everything that I know about my uncle is definitely covered in this book. So I think if you know people who were in the Vietnam War or any war, I think this will really hit hard for you. But overall, this was an incredibly emotional read. As I was expecting, I knew going into this I was going to cry, but we are put side by side with Frankie, and you are seeing what she saw, and it was really upsetting. You're also experiencing things that she experienced when she came home, and that was just heartbreaking, just as a woman, and after knowing what she went through for her country, just to be treated that way. It was a difficult read, but the writing was incredible. This is a thicker book, but this is another book that I couldn't put down. It was a fast read, and this is one of those books where I was ugly crying. It was so sad, but I loved learning about the friendships that she formed, because those friendships that she formed were very uplifting. These women were there for each other, you know, through thick and thin. They helped each other out through it all, and you could really see that in the pages. So love this book. If you're looking for a good historical fiction, then I would absolutely recommend The Women. It was incredible. Okay, we're down to my last book, coming in at number one, but like I said, it's interchangeable. But the very last book I want to talk about, and it may come as no surprise to some of you because I've been talking about this book since April, and that is The Bright Years by Sarah DeMoth. This is a general fiction book, and I don't even, every time I hold this book in my hands to talk to you guys about it, I just don't know where to begin. So let me start off by telling you what it's about. In this book, you are following Lily and Ryan. They are the Brights. You're following Lily's POV in the first third of the book as she kind of gives you a little bit of background information about her, and also as she meets Ryan, as they fall in love and get engaged and get married and have a baby. You're following their story, but you're also following them as cracks start to form in their marriage, because they are both keeping a secret from each other. And I'm not giving anything away. I'm not spoiling this book by telling you what those secrets are, because it is on the flap of the book. But Lily got pregnant before she met Ryan, and she gave the baby up for adoption, and she never told Ryan. And Ryan is hiding the fact that he is an alcoholic. And so those two things just really affects their relationship, and that's essentially what this book is about. I would say this is probably one of the better books and more emotional books I've read in the past several years. I was really drawn into the story. This is a book about how the decisions we make as adults trickle down to other generations and how it affects them. So the choices we make as adults now is going to affect our children and then their children and their children. So I felt like this covered that area very well. Yes, this is a book about alcoholism and how it affects your family and your relationships with your wife and your children, but it's also a book about love and about forgiveness. And it's that forgiveness and that love can be complicated. It can be messy. This was just a very emotional book. This is another book that I was pretty much crying from from here on. And this is a short book. It's only I think it's under 300 pages, but have a box of tissues nearby, because if you don't cry in this book, then something is wrong with you. It's just so hard hitting and emotional, and I loved it. Let's talk about the writing in this book. The writing was beautiful. The way she structured her sentences, I mean, because it is a shorter book, every line, every sentence, every word had a purpose, and the writing was just beautiful. It was lyrical without being flowery. You know, this book was just raw. That's the best way I know how to describe it. This is another one of those books where the characters felt very real to me. I could feel like I could hear they were standing in front of me talking, and I could hear their voices. It was just so unforgettable. And if you're looking for a good hard-hitting family saga, then I would definitely recommend The Bright Years. And as I said, be sure to have a box of tissues nearby, because you will absolutely need it. All right, my friends, that is all I have for you, but I just realized I forgot to tell you how many books I read during the first 6 months of the year. I am filming this on July 1st, so from January until the end of June, I read almost 80 books, and of those 80 books, I only had, I'm about to drop these, 10 5- and 6-star reads. These were my absolute favorites. I would recommend these to anyone and everyone, and I will not stop screaming about these books. They were so good. But if you have read any of these books, let me know in the comments if you agree with me or do you disagree with me. Also, let me know, what are your favorite books so far this year? I'm always looking for books to add to my TBR pile, and you always come through with great recommendations. So let me know in the comments what those are. But that's all I have for you. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.